We'll check back in with you momentarily. In the meantime, we're joined by Ron Hosko, who's president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and a former assistant director of the FBI, and Joe Hicks, a former civil rights leader and vice president of community advocates. Joe, let me start with you on the looting and the fires that are being set tonight as an expression, they say, of frustration with the system.
Well, you just heard somebody behind the camera say this is justice. Somewhere Dr. King is probably an overused kind of a notion here, but Dr. King has got to be spinning his grave. That's what justice looks like. That tramples on the graves of all the old martyrs of the civil rights movement that really did struggle for real things, real racism, real issues they were trying to overcome. And you got thugs and punks and hoodlums in the street, and you got somebody saying, this is justice. This looks very familiar to what I remember in 1992 and again in 1965 when L.A. went through its big riots here. Very similar kind of hooliganism and people looting and vandalizing stores and acting, frankly, like idiots.
You know, Ron, as a police officer yourself, as somebody who's worked in law enforcement your whole life, the people say they don't believe in the system. They say that the blacks are targeted more than the whites are in Ferguson, and they've got documentary evidence to prove it, in particular with respect to traffic stops. There have been couple of incidents in the past involving questionable police behavior, in particular, was cited by the media in the build-up to this case. And they say they just don't believe that this prosecutor tried his hardest. Your thoughts?
I think we need some leadership to emerge from this situation. People who can talk to the mainstream within the African-American community that can discuss the facts, much like the prosecutor did tonight. I thought he gave a great civics lesson to the listeners and to the viewers. But you need somebody that's going to listen to that. And that's our challenge, is to find those leaders who can emerge and who can have this conversation, and law enforcement leaders as well, that can regain the trust in these communities and have a conversation and somehow start fresh.
You got Joe Eric Holder coming out and saying, well, our own investigation at the DOJ is ongoing. It remains ongoing into this police officer and into the police department. And the president talking about how there's a deep distrust between law enforcement and the communities of color, and they're working to train law enforcement to be fair to everyone. Your thoughts on that message?
So when you get national leadership that buys into this kind of stuff that we're seeing on the screen and in a certain kind of way, with Obama saying we need police departments, or police department particularly in Ferguson, that should reflect the racial makeup of that community. Well, what's he saying? So do we need Asian cops to police Asian neighborhoods and Jewish cops to police Jewish neighborhoods and black cops for only black? I mean, this is a ludicrous notion that Obama presents here, as well as him buying into the anger we're seeing here by saying we have to understand the anger of these rioters and looters and people who felt as if they didn't, quote, get justice tonight. Well, that's not helpful. So we hear from Mr. Hoskins' notion that we need leadership. We do, in fact, need leadership, but we're certainly not getting it from this administration, people like Holder, and from Obama, and we're certainly not getting it, frankly, from major national civil rights figures who utilize this in terms of their agenda. Now, Mike Brown is going to reappear again in the pantheon of civil rights greats. He will be installed right next to people like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and other greats. Imagine that. Trayvon Martin is also now a civil rights hero, spoken of in the same terms as Emmett Till.
Well, Trayvon Martin wasn't doing anything wrong, but Michael Brown was. That's just the truth.
But he certainly wasn't performing any kind of courageous acts. And that's what civil rights leaders did. You can't say Trayvon Martin did anything to be considered a civil rights leader or heroic figure, nor can you say that Michael Brown stealing cigars did.
Joe and Ron, thank you both so much for your thoughts. I got to go. We'll be right back with more from Ferguson.